A while back, I asked my patrons for some game animations to analyze, and they came back with some real good ones, so let's look at a few more. Who's first? Excellent choice. Aloy has a lot of traversal animation in her moveset. Climbing, swimming, tightrope walking, etc. But this particular method of traversal is available only in a handful of specific locations. Scattered here and there in this open world's high places are these special rappel points, which you can use to quickly get Aloy down from someplace high. Walk up to one, press the triangle button, and this very flashy rappel animation will play. Once that button is pressed, this whole animation will play out start to finish, and the player won't regain control of Aloy until she reaches the end of the drop. So the functional requirements of this animation are pretty simple. All it really has to do is show her getting from point A to point B and look good doing it, which it does. The custom camera work on the jump and the grappling hook throw look great. The physicality of that lurch as the hook finds purchase overhead feels right, and I really like the posing work here. I don't know if this particular animation involved any amount of motion capture or if this was all hand-keyed, but in either case, the animator has clearly paid a lot of attention to Aloy's posing relative to camera. Just look at her key poses as we go through this whole chain of actions. The jump, the wind-up flinging that rope way out to the side, the way she twists her body around for the throw, the way her legs swing out behind her as the rope goes taut, the way she drops one hand and twirls back around for the landing, just strong posing throughout. This animation also serves as effective characterization. Aloy is extremely practiced and competent. She has been training her whole life to be great at things like this. Even if the player is still getting the hang of the game, you want Aloy's animation to convey her high level of skill. Now, is this jump first, secure your line later rappelling technique practical? Obviously not, and it's not trying to be. There's a fuzzy line between exaggerated competence and impossibly superhuman skill, and the animator's goal when depicting this kind of fantastical skill level is to make it feel believable enough, to make the physicality of it feel more or less correct, to show the character's effort and exertion, to make it feel plausible in a tall tales kind of way, to not worry too much about the fatal levels of rope burn her poor hands have experienced. Or maybe the rope is more of a bungee cord. I don't know, who cares? Now, you can reasonably argue that this animation is stretching most definitions of plausibility pretty far, but it does look cool, and really, it's not that much more absurd than half the other stuff Aloy is capable of in this game. And most importantly, it gets her to her destination quickly. This kind of player experience consideration is one of the many reasons why realism isn't often that useful a lens to look through for gameplay animation. The majority of players do not want to watch a lengthy animation of Aloy carefully securing her line and rappelling down the cliff with proper methodical technique. They want her to get to the bottom of this drop already so they can get back to playing. Speaking of functional concerns, there might be another reason for Aloy jumping so far out into the air before attaching the rope. Now, I didn't work on this, so I can't say this for sure, but I have a hunch that this animation is allowing them not to have to show where the hook attaches. And even if that's not the main reason for her jumping so far away from the rappel point, it is at least a huge benefit. Because it is a lot easier to just show Aloy throwing a line at some unseen target than it would be to show that line connecting to a target and then accurately depicting the rope physics at play as the hook finds purchase and she dangles from the line. This way, there's just fewer elements that have to feel right on camera at once. And that's even more true when you factor in that not all rappel points in this game are stationary. You can also rappel off the top of these tall neck robots, which are very mobile, and factoring in the movement of the thing your rope is attached to and how that would impact the physics of Aloy's descent would be kind of a nightmare. So just having Aloy jump way out here and then having the camera simply focus on her the whole way down cleverly sidesteps those complications. Really, the only issues I can find with this animation are some very minor and kind of understandable polish hitches. I can see several factors here that could make this particular animation very challenging to technically implement in-game. It involves the character and game camera covering a large distance in a short time. It has to account for variable distances, because some of these rappel drops are higher than others. It involves a character holding and interacting with a rope in literally any way. There is no circumstance in which a character using a rope in a video game is not a giant pain in the butt. But even ignoring the rope, there are some sudden lurching changes in Aloy's position and velocity over the course of this drop that aren't super noticeable, but you do feel them. This first little pop, I'm totally fine with. It's an intentionally quick transition from Aloy's locomotion to the start of the rappel. She could be in any number of poses at the exact moment you hit the rappel button, so to some extent, this is unavoidable. But then, as she starts to descend, there's this little pop. This couple of frames where she either moves up or just locks in place while the camera keeps moving down. It's kind of hard to tell. Then there's another big lurch in her position here as she prepares to twirl around. And a final one here just before she touches down. If I had to guess, it looks like these lurches are happening at the seams between each phase of the rappelling motion. Like her falling momentum and her spatial relationship to the camera don't perfectly line up across those seams. Of course, in a film, these sorts of hitches would be much easier to fix, but getting these things to look perfect in a game engine can be quite challenging and consume an enormous amount of time that might be better spent on other things. I think it's telling that this animation has the same pops in the exact same places in the remaster. And in the sequel. And if I'm having to get this nitpicky to find problems, I'd say that this animation is in a pretty great place. Next! I feel like you're being cheeky with this one, but you know what? Challenge accepted. Like most of us, Pac-Man is capable of only two things: eating and dying. His locomotion/eating animation is a very rapid cycle composed of 3 animation frames: mouth closed, mouth half open, mouth open. Very simple, but so is he. Pac-Man has directional variants for this eating cycle, facing up, down, and to either side. If caught by a ghost, Pac-Man will play his death animation, facing upward and, I guess, opening his mouth so wide he folds in on himself and pops out of existence. As one does. The real stars of this show are actually the ghosts, who have much more personality. For one thing, they've got eyes that look in the direction they're currently moving. In fact, their eyes start looking in the direction they're about to go 7 to 8 frames before they change direction, which I really like. It subtly suggests intent before action, giving these ghosts the illusion of intelligence and awareness of the space they're navigating, which is an impressive attention to detail for a game made 45 years ago. The ghost's locomotion is otherwise a very simple cycle, just 2 frames of rippling at the bottom of their draped cloth. Or feet, I guess, if that's how you want to interpret it. And if you eat a power pellet, all the ghosts will turn blue and get this little defeated-looking, stunned expression while vulnerable. If you catch them in this state, their body disappears and their eyes make the trip back to the penalty box. It's not much for animation, and a lot of it is pretty abstracted in that classic arcade pixel art way, but it's a lot of personality for a game released in literally 1980. Game animation of this era was so limited that it had to focus almost entirely on delivering functional information, and this does so very well. This animation tells us everything we need to know while we're playing: which direction Pac-Man is facing, which way the ghosts are facing, and what state each ghost is currently in: dangerous, vulnerable, or defeated. And I am impressed at how much appeal this dead simple animation has. The character designs are charming, the eyes on the ghosts are really cute. I love the choice to have these 3 ghosts bouncing around inside the penalty box for the first couple of seconds. They could have just been sitting and waiting in there for the game to start, but this makes them feel more like they're impatient, just itching to get out and start chasing you around. I like that Pac-Man's eating loop stops if you hit a wall, helping to further visually emphasize that you are not currently moving anywhere. Little visual touches like these can have so much impact in a game this simple. You know what? You were right, there was more to dig into with this one than I expected. Good suggestion. All right, one more. Yes, love it. And thank you for specifying basic melee combo, because, as many of you probably know, Sora's combos in Kingdom Hearts games are very malleable. You can unlock and equip abilities which extend these combos with extra hits, or add a variety of conditional finishers at the end. And even the unupgraded basic combo can change significantly based on context and enemy position. For example, this first overhead swing might be swapped for a lunging attack if the targeted enemy is far away. The final attack in the combo might change to this sweeping slash if there's multiple enemies right in front of you. And this entire ground combo might segue into Sora's aerial attack combo if the enemy you're attacking winds up airborne at any point. But for my sake, let's just focus on this default Sora at factory settings combo. It begins with an overhead swing, follows with a lunge and swipe, then finishes with another big vertical slash. I find the timing on these attacks interesting because, compared to a lot of other action games of this sort, Sora's Keyblade swings feel a little more sluggish than I'd have expected. The span of time between Sora's attack animation starting and those attacks connecting with an enemy is often between 14 and 30 frames, with each successive attack in the chain taking a little longer to wind up. Measuring at a rate of 60 frames per second, that's between a quarter and a half second of wind-up for each attack, which is still quite fast, but compared to something like Nero's basic attacks in Devil May Cry 5, which seem to take between 12 and 18 frames to connect, or something even faster like these attacks in Zenless Zone Zero, which have a 7 to 16 frame delay, Sora's attacks feel a little weightier, closer to the basic attack timing of a character like Kratos, which I wouldn't have expected. This is ultimately fine, of course. Faster does not always mean better with these things, but it is an interesting design choice on a character this agile. And it is clearly an intentional choice, too, because Sora's basic combo maintains this wind-up time even in Kingdom Hearts 3. In fact, the last attack in that combo has an even longer wind-up than any of these. I do think that the clarity on these animations could be a little stronger. They're not terrible by any means, but these vertical slashes, and the stabbing thrust especially, aren't the kinds of attacks that are going to give you the clearest character silhouette or swinging arcs when viewed from behind. That said, that thrust being followed by this slash to the side does at least prevent Sora's body from obscuring the entire attack. And the overhead slashes do bring the Keyblade just far enough to either side to ensure that you don't lose visibility on the weapon for too long at a time. Besides which, how these attacks look from behind isn't ultimately that important because once you're in a fight and Sora is surrounded, you're going to be seeing these attacks from all angles. And Kingdom Hearts combat can get so visually chaotic so quickly that, honestly, even Sora's clearest attack animations would get lost in the noise without these bright light trails and the particle effects on successful hits. I also think that some of these attacks could flow more cleanly from one to the next. Now, some degree of visual popping between the end of one animation and the start of the next is to be expected, especially in a game from the PS2 era. There is a very generous window of time after each attack in this combo where you can press the button again to cue the next attack in the sequence, and the earlier you press the button in that window, the sooner you interrupt the previous animation's recovery, the bigger the posing change you are likely to see as the next animation starts. And that's quite reasonable. But some of these before and after poses aren't even close to matching up. Most of these attacks appear to start from Sora's combat idle stance, which works fine if it's the first attack in the chain, but each of those attacks is going to leave Sora in a different recovery pose, which is ideally the pose that the next attack in the combo should start from. Popping all the way back to Sora's combat idle pose for just a frame or two in between each swing is gonna flow way less smoothly. Now, I do get that each one of these attacks would eventually resolve back to this combat idle pose if you let it, but if these animations can only flow smoothly from one to the next if the player waits until the very end of the opportunity window to input the next attack, that suggests to me that maybe the starting pose for the second and third attacks in the combo should instead match the pose Sora's actually going to be in when the player presses the button most of the time. Of course, the main reason why they didn't do that is likely a consequence of that combo malleability I mentioned earlier. The fact that so many of these animations could happen in any order depending on context and which abilities you happen to have equipped makes providing animation coverage for every possible transition a pretty daunting prospect. And I guess I would agree that these more noticeable seams are a worthwhile trade-off for all that versatility and customization. Still just a little unfortunate that it results in so many jerky transitions in your default string of attacks, though. I'm also noticing some weird jitter in these animations now that I'm framing through them. Like, look at Sora's hands here. The way his grip detaches from the hilt for a single frame sometimes. Or this occasional weird jerkiness in the arcs of his motion. I wonder if... We're looking at the HD remaster of this game right now. I'm wondering if this was in the original. Hang on. Okay, it is a remaster problem. So, the original game ran at 30 frames per second on the PS2, but the HD remaster bumped that up to a smoother 60 frames per second, and I guess these animation assets weren't touched up for that higher frame rate, so we're just seeing some messy automatic interpolation every other frame. So I guess this is less of an animation problem and more a problem of a remaster exposing some seams that weren't meant to be visible and not fixing them. Interesting. Anyway, now I've been nitpicking these animations on what amounts to minor technical gripes so far, but you want to know what this attack combo excels at? Character appeal. This attack combo suits Sora perfectly. It captures his enthusiasm and fearlessness and childlike passion. And it's got just enough of that classic cartoon aesthetic baked into the style of motion to ensure that Sora's animation fits right alongside a Disney character without looking out of place. No other video game's combat looks quite like Kingdom Hearts, and that's quite the aesthetic achievement. Kingdom Hearts animation is just generally great across the board, and Sora's basic combo maybe isn't the best Kingdom Hearts has to offer, but I'd still say it's generally quite successful, especially when you remember that we're just looking at the foundation layer of something much more complex. Once again, a very big thank you to my patrons for all of their animation suggestions, specifically Nicholas Ehlers, Megabyte01, and Stefan for suggesting these three in particular. If you would like to get in on animation suggestions for future videos of this sort, as always, I have got a Patreon link down in the description below. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!